Good morning. Welcome to our speaker series at NCBPS. We're happy to have this morning with us Miss Marlene Mueller, who is from Novozymes, and she's going to be talking about biotechnology, enzymes, and careers. So welcome, Miss Mueller, and go ahead with your presentation. Thank you for coming.
Great. Hi, everybody. So I'll give a little talk. I'd like this to be informal. I know that most of you are probably muted, so I'd like to invite you, if you have a question, that you can unmute and ask that. And if you choose not to do that, there should be time at the end of the slides for you to ask questions. So as we go through, please think about that and think about questions that you have, and don't hesitate to kind of jump in and interrupt me if you have a question. So I'll kick off by talking a little bit about who I am, and since this is focused on career development and options for what you can go out and do in the world, I'll focus first on that, and then I'll get into a little bit about Novozymes and the business that we do. So this is my LinkedIn page, actually, that I've overlapped some things, and you can see the connect at the bottom if you wanted to go in and see that. And if you don't already have a LinkedIn page for yourself, as you get into looking for jobs and connecting with people at different companies, this highly recommended. It's one of the top sites for B2B businesses and connecting with other people and developing your network that will help you navigate as you go through your career. So a bit about my background. I'm actually from Canada, so I grew up in Toronto, Ontario. I went to the University of Waterloo, which is about 2 hours west of Toronto. And after graduating from high school, I did a Bachelor of Science in Science and Business and a master's degree in biology. Now, the interesting thing here is the universities are becoming very good at coming up with creative programs. So you would think science and business, years ago, you could only get a strictly science degree. And this one is actually a focus on science. So it's a major in biology with a minor in business. And what that allowed me to do was I actually got started on the technical side, but as I progressed through my career, I gradually moved into the commercial side of the business. And you can see that if you look at that arrow, I started as a research scientist, then I went into technical service where I had more interactions with customers running the business. Then I moved into sales and actually working with strategic accounts, meaning customers that are very big and strategic to the business that you want to do more with them and have a closer relationship and program together with them. Then I moved into people management. So that's a whole other area of managing people and running the business. And now I've landed in a role where I'm actually running a new business area for us within Novozymes. So as I've progressed different roles, moving from technical into the business side, I've had many different roles, and I've also worked in many different functions. So within the same company, I've worked with biofuels, with food and beverage, with textiles, with laundry, household care, all these different types of applications where you can use the enzymes. And now, many years ago, Novozymes, we broadened to do both enzymes and microorganisms, and that's what I do now. I work with yeast, which is a live organism, as opposed to enzymes, which are not. So very different, a very different area, all within the same company. And what I hope you to take away from that is that when you hear about a technical company, a biotech company, there are a lot of scientists and chemists and engineers that work at Novozymes. There are also marketing people, sales people, different types of business development people. There are people in sourcing and procurement. There are people in transportation logistics. And I could go on and on of all the different functions of types of roles within a biotech company. So you think about that as you go through your career, that you can find a field, whether that's procurement, for example, and you can apply that to a number of different types of businesses. And that's even evident within my role, where I started technical and then I've landed in a commercial role. So that's a little bit about me and career and functions. I'll just pause there for a second. Are there any burning questions about roles, functions, careers before I move on to the actual business? Okay, I guess you guys are all shy today. We'll leave it for the end. Okay. So Novozymes North America, the company is located in Franklinton, which is about 30 minutes north of Raleigh. So one of the benefits of having Novozymes located in that area is when I'm going to tell you a bit more about the production process, but one of the byproducts, the spent biomass that comes out of the fermentation when we produce enzymes, we can actually give that to the local farmers, and they use that as a source of nitrogen and fertilizer for their crops. So that's a way that Novozymes is able to work synergistically with the community and give back based on our footprint. I don't know how many of you know what enzymes are. As I mentioned, Novozymes, we are a leading producer and developer of enzymes and now microorganisms. So I'm going to talk to you just a little bit more about what enzymes are and where they're used. And if you ask the question, where are enzymes used in day-to-day life, you have been impacted by enzymes and you may not even know it. So if you just take a look at this picture, I can tell you that enzymes are used in washing clothes and making them brighter. They're used in stonewashing jeans. So if you have a pair of jeans on right now, in the old days, long ago, they would actually put pumice stone into these large dryers and washers, and they would actually physically stonewash the jeans. But now you can use enzymes to do that, and you don't damage the jeans when you do that. So you get the same look of the stonewashed jeans without the damage and the strength loss in the fabric. Orange juice, pressing fruit to get more juice out of the pulp. Baking bread so that it stays nice, fresh, longer on the shelf. Beer, wine, that uses both enzymes and microorganisms, yeast, in order to make those drinks. In the background, you'll see a dishwasher washing dishes. Those formulations, those products also contain enzymes. So Novozymes, we do a lot of work with other businesses. So we're not a company that often works directly with a consumer. So that's why you may not know what our products do, but you certainly use the products that other companies use. If you drink Coca-Cola, for example, the high fructose corn syrup that goes into those products are produced using enzymes. If you drive a car and you go to the gasoline station and you see contains 10% ethanol on the gas pump, well, that ethanol is produced with both enzymes and microorganisms with yeast, with a good chance that it's coming from Novozymes because we're one of the largest producers. And that ethanol is then impacting the consumer and helping replace gasoline with a clean burning fuel. So those are just a few examples to let you know that you are impacted by the business that we do probably every day. And enzymes, what are they? Well, they're actually just a protein. They make things happen. So if there's a reaction that will happen, whether it's a reaction making something happen or breaking something down, it's actually what will help make that reaction happen and speed it up. It's very specific, which is why enzymes are really such a cool technology, because you can often use a chemical to do these things, but they often have a very broad impact. So they'll do something broad, and that means you have some negative side effects of those chemical reactions. But enzymes are so specific that you can go in and make a very specific reaction and not impact anything else. And that often has very positive implications for the environment. And the other thing that people often they misunderstand is enzymes are not alive. Even though they're doing something, they're really just a protein. So you think of an egg, for example, that's got a lot of protein in it. That's not alive. But it does come from a chicken, which is alive. Very similar with enzymes. The other thing with enzymes is that they don't work forever. So they're kind of like a battery. You put a battery in something, it'll work for a while, and then it'll gradually lose its activity, and you've got to replace it. The same thing with enzymes. So these enzymes, they are proteins. We have them in our body, thousands or millions of enzymes in our body to make things happen. And what you're looking at here, if you look at that squiggly thing on the side, that's actually kind of a diagram of what an enzyme looks like. You basically, protein, as you might know, are amino acids, and those amino acids then are put into a three-dimensional structure, and that's actually what helps make the reaction happen. So there's often an active site, what they call, that will then latch on to what's called the substrate, what's going to make what it's going to act upon, and then they will come together and make that reaction happen. So if you want an example of where you have that in your body, think about your saliva. When you put a soda cracker in your mouth, soda cracker is largely carbohydrate, it's made of starch. When you put it in your mouth, you start salivating, and in your saliva, you have different amylase enzymes. Amylase breaks down amylose. Starch is basically amylose and amylopectin carbohydrates. So your amylase enzymes in your saliva will start to break down the starch in the soda cracker. And if you ever took it upon yourself to put a soda cracker in your mouth and just suck on it for a really long time, you would actually start to taste a little sweetness because of the action of those enzymes in your saliva starting to break down the starch in the soda cracker. There's a cool little experiment that you can try sometime if you care to. So all through your body, saliva, in your stomach, you have a lot of enzymes that will break down the food and help with the digestion process. And then through your whole metabolic activity, you have enzymes that will help create energy and make things happen. There are just, you can Google it, there are millions of examples of enzymes. And often when you see the ASE, a protease, an amylase, a cellulase, a lipase, those are enzymes that are working on the substrate, such as the amylose, the protein, the cellulose, the lipid, and they're often connected in the naming that you can see that. So that's a little bit around what enzymes are. They come from the sources of enzymes where we get them from in order to make them. Come from bacteria, fungi, plants, animals. So we collect them from many different sources, and then we produce them in a commercial scale. And in order to find them, we actually have scientists at Novozymes that go out to all parts of the world. So if they go on a business trip, they may take a little side excursion for a few hours and go out and collect some soil samples from places that have, that are very dry, or you have a lot of moisture or heat. And the reason for that is if you go to a region or an area that has these extreme conditions, then it's likely that the microorganisms that are living in that environment are going to have the unique traits to withstand those harsh conditions. So if you go to a geothermal area where you have a very hot environment, anything that lives there is going to need to be able to function and survive in extreme high temperatures. And then we can harvest those organisms and then isolate the enzymes that have those unique characteristics. So it's pretty cool when I talk to one of the scientists at Novozymes and they say, yeah, I'm going to be out this afternoon because I'm going to collect mushrooms in the forest. And they do that, and they come back with samples and they put them in little test tubes, and that's what creates a library of different organisms that we can then extract the enzymes from in order to develop applications, so whatever we need. So we have this huge library of microorganisms that have been collected from all over the place, and they grow them up on plates, and they can look at them and then collect samples and screen for these enzyme activities. And so we have a huge library that we can look for. And of course, there are different methods, assays of screening for these different enzyme activities that have been developed over time. So once we have screened for these enzyme activities and we find something that looks really interesting, the next step is to ask, can we make it better? Sometimes when we find one, it's good just as it is, and then other times we need to improve it. So maybe it works at a high or a low temperature, but we want it to work at an even higher temperature or a lower temperature. So we can actually do 3D modeling of the enzyme, and that's what you see here on the screen. And we can go in and say, because of the knowledge, if we change these 2 or 3 amino acids, we're going to impact the way the enzyme works, and that will make the enzyme either work at a higher temperature or lower temperature or whatever it is that we're trying to do. And we can go in there and make those changes to the protein. And that's what you would then call a protein engineered enzyme that's being used, that has been modified for use in an application. So we can then get exactly the type of enzyme that we want. We then have to scale that up. So we start with a really small amount. We gradually scale that up in flasks and then bigger and bigger equipment until we're in a big fermenter where we're actually growing an organism that will produce and excrete these enzymes. We control that process using computers and different programs. And then ultimately, we're producing that product in either a solid or a liquid form. And there's all kinds of technology that goes into the formulation, into the production. So whereas we have a lot of scientists and chemists working in the lab in collecting and creating these enzymes, we also have a lot of engineers working to produce the enzymes and optimize these processes to make it an economical production process. So that's a lot of information, but it gives you a really high level overview of what enzymes are, how we get them, how we make them better, how we produce them, how they're delivered to the customer, liquid or solid, and then they go out to the industry. And this also gives you an idea of all the different types of careers you could have throughout this process, from being a scientist to an engineer or operator to a formulation chemist working on the format of the enzymes, and then delivering it to the industry is where everything else comes in, from commercial sales, from technical service, to sourcing, to marketing, to people management, logistics, transportation, et cetera, et cetera. So there are a lot of options there. So when you think about, wow, well, if I went into finance, for example, how do I decide what kind of company I want to work for? Well, that's what it's up for you to decide. What kind of purpose do you want to contribute to in life? Whether that's something like a biotech company that has an impact to the environment, or whether it's a, excuse me, a financial institution that can help people run businesses and help with personal finance. There's all kinds of options, and that's part of your journey to figure out what it is you want to do, and then how does that fit into the world. And as you can see here, there's just so many different options. So I highly recommend that you talk to people, you get different perspectives, so that can help you make the best decision. So once we have the enzymes, this just says that there's a lot of positive impacts that enzymes can have. To use enzymes instead of maybe a traditional chemical process, or not using anything at all. And one of the best examples, I mean, I've already given you an example with the fuel ethanol, the 10% ethanol that you see in your gasoline. That actually improves the environmental impact of the gasoline, because ethanol is a clean burning fuel. Another really great example is in baking bread. So if you went back years and years ago, they used to use a chemical called bromate to help with the shelf life and freshness of the bread. And bromate is actually a carcinogen. So even in very small amounts, there were there was risk of what impact. We didn't really understand it back then, but what impact could that have on human health and groundwater, et cetera. So enzymes have actually come in, and they're used in baking bread. They have completely replaced the bromate. So bromate is not used anymore. And the reason that you can have bread that stays fresh for a long time is because of specifically some types of amylase enzymes that will modify the starch in the bread, in the flour, and will allow the bread to stay fresher longer. And there's a big, long technical explanation as to how that works. If you're interested, let me know. I can find someone that can explain it. But the bottom line is that the enzymes are a natural solution to getting the fresh keeping in the bread and replace a harsh chemical so that it's safer for people and for the environment. But there are a number of other benefits that we can capitalize on and leverage with enzymes as a technology. So it's really, really, really cool. And if you ever end up working in the lab with an enzyme, you need such small amounts. I mean, the work that I've done with enzymes, it's amazing that you can have such a small molecule that has such a big impact on the application.
Marlene, I know you can't see the chat, but there was a question about what would be the ingredient name on the label to look for that kind of enzyme that preserves the bread.
Yeah, so often in bread, sometimes you will see enzymes actually on the ingredient label, and other times you will not. And the reason you may not is because the enzyme does not actually end up in the final product. It's used in the processing. So as you process the starch in the bread, it will cause that reaction to happen, but then the enzyme actually does not last. It doesn't stay there. and it doesn't end up, because you bake the bread and the enzyme is actually destroyed in that process. So you would only know that enzymes are used in that process because the bread has a really long shelf life. So if it has a long shelf life, typically enzymes need to be used in that process. If you buy bread that's been made in a local bakery and maybe they don't use enzymes, then your bread is going to go stale in 1 or 2 days. And then you'll know it probably doesn't include enzymes. And that's very similar to juice production, for example. Producers might use an enzyme to squeeze the juice out of the fruit, but because that's a process and the enzyme doesn't end up in the final product, they then don't need to label it.
Thank you. That was a great explanation.
Okay, super. Any other questions? All right, I'll take that as a no. All right, so this is just some examples. I've already talked about a couple of them, the biofuels, the bread fresh keeping. I talked about stonewashed jeans. Another application is actually getting brighter clothes. And I don't know if some of you remember Tide detergent, where they talked about get your clothes brighter. That was actually due to an enzyme that would reduce the little fuzzies on the clothes. So that's fabric pilling. And when you wash clothes over and over again, often with cotton, you get the little pills or fuzzies on your clothes. And it's actually that fuzz that reduces the brightness of the color. It's the optics. You can't see through the fuzz to see the color. So if you remove that fuzz, that fabric pilling, with some very specific enzymes that aren't going to destroy your clothes, you then see the color brightness of the clothes. And that was the technology behind the brighter color in the laundry washing. Now what you'll hear a lot about is cold temperature washing with detergents. That's also an enzyme technology that allows the enzymes that have been pulled from some cold parts of the world that can clean out the protein stains, the lipid stains, the fats that are coming from your food at a low temperature, because they've been designed, pulled from nature to do that, and then refined to do it even better. So a couple examples there with the cold water detergent. So a lot of benefits. I talked about myself working with the transport, with the biofuels, ethanol area. That today the industry with biofuels is primarily using corn that is not human corn. It's corn that could be fed to animals, or often is not good enough to feed to animals. But they use corn that is grown in the Midwest, mostly in the Midwest in North America, and they break down the starch in that corn into glucose using enzymes. And then we take that glucose and we ferment it using yeast into ethanol. So that's one way to do it. The other way to do it is to take a total agricultural waste, such as, so if you go with the same theme, you take the corn cobs, which are typically burned or discarded. You can break down those corn cobs, which they consist of a lot of cellulose. Cellulose, you break that down, that breaks down into glucose, and then you can ferment that also into ethanol. So the waste into biofuels, that's called second generation ethanol. That's also an application that we work on. And it's not taking off quite as fast as the first generation starch to ethanol area, but it's got huge positive impacts on the environment, and we're definitely focused on that. So just a few examples. There's many, many more. If you're interested to know, you can just go to the novozymes.com website and find all the information that you could ever want. So as I've referred to before, I'm coming to the end of my slides here. There's a lot of different roles. If you're interested in the technical side, there's a lot of different scientists, microbiologists, geneticists working at Novozymes. I know for myself, when I was in high school, many years back, there were not very many women in science, math and science. So there was a big push, and that was one of the reasons that I chose to go into science as a career because of that. Now, I think that's changed a lot. So we actually have a lot of ladies working in our labs, also engineers in our production. So that's all changing, and it's fair game for everybody. So it's just to say that there are so many options out there, and you have a lot of choice there to consider. This is a picture of Novozymes in Franklinton. There is about 600 people or so working in this facility. It covers everything. It covers the production of the enzymes. It covers the development of the enzymes with the research and development. We have the service function, so technical service, salespeople, marketing. We also have procurement, quality control, logistics, planning, a lot of different functions here. So the point of sharing this to you is there's a lot of diversity in the roles at Novozymes, at a biotech company. So you have a lot of different people that you could talk to learn about how you can work in a biotech type role, whether you're the scientist or you're doing something different. If that purpose has meaning to you, then there's many different options of how you can engage in the biotech industry, engage in making the world a better place by improving the environment with biological solutions. And it can be technical or it could be something else. So that was what I had in terms of a little bit about Novozymes and the biotech company itself and the role that we play. You've learned a little bit about enzymes, hopefully, and the different options that you have if you're looking for a career in biotech. So with that, I'll say thank you, and I'll open it up for any questions, and I'll hand it back to Kim.
I know that you did a great job describing this information because science is not really my wheelhouse, but if I had had these wonderful examples and this interesting presentation, I would have been much more interested as a student of science because there's so many opportunities, and we can just share this with our science and biology, anatomy teachers and different ones. And I know our students will be so interested to hear about all this great information. And it's so neat to know that we have this company just a little bit outside Raleigh you shared with me. So thank you so much.
Okay, you're very welcome. I enjoyed it, and I hope that I've managed to pique some interest in some people.
Well, you piqued mine, and I'm definitely not a science person, so thank you. You are a teacher of science for sure, so thank you, and we just enjoyed it so much, and we thank you for being with us even though you're taking a sick day, and we appreciate it and hope you get to feeling better. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Kim. Bye, everybody.
Bye.